name is Richard Askam, and welcome to the latest edition of the FESPA podcast. Really all about the personalization experience. My role with that is officially ambassador of personalization, which I think actually gives me a claim to the throne of England. I'm not sure whether that's true, but I like the idea of it. So we'll see how I get on with that. And I'm joined this morning by Dans Rozentals from Printful. Good morning, or good afternoon, Dan. In fact, it's just turned into afternoon.
Yeah, exactly. Thanks for having me.
That's a pleasure. And you're in Riga today, is that right?
Exactly. Calling out of the head office.
And we've just been talking before we started the recording about winter. I'm cold today. It's cold here in the UK. You're used to this, but either that's a white wall behind you or you're sitting in an igloo. I'm not sure which.
A bit of both.
I can imagine. So, but listen, it's a pleasure to have you on the podcast today. Thanks for taking the time. And obviously, we're only a few short weeks away now from the latest edition of the Personalisation Experience coming up in Amsterdam on March the 20th. Part of the FESPA show, 4-day event. It's one of the big grand slams, the way I describe it, Dan, of print. You've been to FESPA before, I think?
I haven't actually. My old our head of sales was there last year. He was actually also on the podcast,
Yep.
also talking about personalization. So if anyone, probably most of the things haven't changed much over the year. So it's a good, insightful discussion that you had.
Well, it's interesting, isn't it? Because I've been involved in personalization now for nearly 20 years, and originally in the drinks industry, and then through various sort of iterations. But over the last 8 or 9 years, working as a sort of speaker and commentator on the industry, I tend to notice the changes more than the industry does, and it's a bit like watching somebody else's children grow up. You notice them change, whereas the parent doesn't necessarily notice. So you say that about a year, but I think there's been quite a lot of development in the last year, and for me, the big part of an event like the personalization experience is to bring that out in front of an audience, those changes, those viewpoints, because if we're not careful, personalization will get stuck, and in the mind of the consumer, it's just your name on a bar of chocolate or your name on a bottle of Coke or whatever it is,
Yeah.
and we know, and there's so much more to it than that, right?
Yeah, exactly. Well, when I mean nothing much has changed, it's the same principles still hold, right? Companies are still testing those things out. They don't have a solid strategy in most of the cases. It's just an personalization is kind of an add-on to their business instead of like the main thing they do. So that, like, if you talk about that from that angle, nothing much has changed. If we talk from like the brand owner perspective, so many things have actually changed, and it's so much easier to do. Anybody can launch a brand, go to Google, search for the biggest keywords that are relevant, go to ChatGPT, write product descriptions, go to Dolly, create designs, upload them, sell them. And that's it. Anybody can make a brand and just like scale massively, absolutely massively.
So that's quite interesting. So nothing has changed, but everything has changed in the space of a year. But I think, and you just landed on something really interesting there, because I've been saying for a while now that the advent of technology in the mind of the consumer has allowed them to become almost the brand in themselves. And so
Yeah.
if we look at media for the example, and everywhere somebody's standing with a phone, that they're a broadcaster. They can create their own content, they can put their own content out there. They are effectively their own media. What you're saying with the tools that now exist to allow people to create their own brand, or rather interestingly, to co-brand alongside existing brands. So you see your name and you see Nike's name on the same garment, and
Yeah.
suddenly you're co-branding with Nike. That ease of expression and the
Mhm.
use of personalization for me is the big change, and chat gpt, as you mentioned, and other AI exists, I believe, but it's rapidly changing things, isn't it?
It is. It definitely is. And I feel like with this rapid change, people also, well, trends don't live for as long. And one of the last things I saw online were all the Stanley Cups. There was this like one post about a car burning and the Stanley Cup still having like ice in the cup. So it's like a crazy product, and holds heat so well. And then you saw in the US, like none of the stores could actually keep up with the demand for Stanley Cups.
Right.
but it's probably not going to be a long living trend. It's if it hasn't already died out, it will in a week or two, or give it a month.
That's
Right? But
that's really interesting, and that's being driven, I guess, by that same generation that now see themselves as a media broadcaster, now see themselves as a co-brand or a brand in themselves, and
exactly.
the speed that they can adopt the ability to deploy that is the same speed that they get out of it at.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah. So that and I think this is the interesting point, and one of the reasons that we're doing the personalization experience, Dan, is to get under the cover of these discussions, because it's all very well us sitting here and saying, oh yeah, it's this, but what do we do about it, and how does the industry, how do you see the wider industry adapting and adopting that quick up the mountain, quick down the mountain strategy when they're so used to a 10, 20, 30-year plan. This is now a 10, 20, 30-minute plan.
Yeah, pretty much. And like obviously, as a representative of Printful and somebody coming out of the print on demand industry, I just have to talk about it. And we quite often get to chat with customers that have built their businesses on supply chain based in China, ordering items 6 months ahead, getting them planning, trying to figure out how to sell them. But it's again, if a trend, and I did the research, a trend usually lives for like 90 days. Those 6 months, you're already 3 months behind. It's
Yeah.
just insane. So either you're left with too much product or you just didn't get enough. And that's always the issue. So from a customer perspective, it's just absolutely beautiful. You can spend money every single day on something new. From a brand owner perspective, it is definitely a challenge how to plan the activities for the year ahead.
So is there an argument there then, that instead of trying to follow a trend that is impossible to keep up with, perhaps maybe the print industry should start to lead those trends?
Hmm. That's an interesting perspective. Definitely from the brand owner side, because as you said, everybody can now be a content creator, build a community around them, and kind of lead the way. Where I think, yeah, I
I mean,
haven't.
I don't know how they do it, by the way. I mean, that literally just landed in my head as you were talking. But what you've done is highlight the problem. So instead of trying to solve the problem, you change the problem and change the problem to one that you can solve. In many ways. And I've said before, Dan, a number of times in speeches that I've given at print industry events, that the print industry needs to disrupt itself rather
Mm,
than be disrupted. And if they can create almost their own inner agency and have these conversations with themselves, then they're leading with the solution rather than chasing the problem. I know Printful are very good at that. It's why you've been so successful over the last few years, or many years, in fact. What do you see? You use that word print on demand, or that phrase
mm.
print on demand. The demand has grown significantly. Is print able to keep up with demand?
Well, the biggest spike was obviously COVID,
Yeah.
when everybody was just staying home. A lot of people lost their jobs. So Printful was not way for them to, get that extra income, support their families, and actually build something lasting. So with my team, we primarily work with existing Printful customers, and the largest portion of them, size-wise. And we get to all of these stories, and for most of the brands that we work with, they started 2 3 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
So they jumped on that massive, massive spike. Obviously, we as a company also had to keep up because we're part logistics as well. We have our own, fulfillment centers and everything. So we also had to scale massively. But for now, yeah, I think keeping up isn't a problem. It's just like give us what you got.
Yeah, yeah, I like that. Careful what you wish for. And I think the fact that you've solved that sort of circular economy yourself, with that creation of demand, creation of supply, creation of ability to supply that demand, and then go again, is one of the reasons I think that Printful have been so successful in that marketplace. I can't see, and I'm old now, Dan, and old and wizened. So who cares what I think? But I can't see this changing anytime soon in terms of consumer demand. With the genie is out of the bottle, it's not going to go back in now that people realize that they can and I use the word customize because I don't think personalize actually does it enough justice now anymore. In many ways, I think if we could go back to day one, we'd use a different word. And for me, that word would be individualize, because really what we're seeing now is a generation, two generations, in fact, that like the fact that they are individualizing themselves.
Yeah.
So with that in mind, and with no end in sight to this demand, what are Printful's sort of hopes and dreams for the next few years? What do you see happening?
I think it's only going to scale, and these like large fashion brands and retail brands are going to jump on the trend as well, because I think that's where the biggest growth will be coming from. And you already see like brands, for example, I was on a business trip last year in New York, walking down Fifth Avenue, and went on into the Nike flagship store. It's like a freaking three-story building, and it's just like packed with people. And on one of the stories, they have like a, I don't know what they call them, like a personalization studio or something,
Yep.
but they're essentially like engraving, dyeing, embroidering, printing on like products right in the store.
Yeah.
It's completely mind-blowing. And I feel like with the impact that all the other massive retailers can make, like that's where they should go to, because they already have the customer base, right? And it's more or less loyal, right? You found your favorite fits, favorite jeans in a particular store. So if you can go to that same store and really make it your own, I think like honestly, that's going to be the biggest change in the industry once that happens.
I think you're right, and I've seen photographs of the queues down Fifth Avenue trying to get to that store for that very reason. And what's interesting, I guess, and this is the classic technology development curve, that ability to do in-store print personalization, or whatever the methodology is, in-store personalization has become much more possible over the last 5, 10 years. 10 years ago, Dan, I was asked to do in-store personalization for the Share a Coke campaign, which is my little claim to fame in the world. And the answer was always no, because in most cases, the print equipment was bigger than the store. So it just wasn't physically or practically possible. They wanted the theater of it, but they couldn't actually do the capability. What Nike are doing now, and others, as technology has got smaller, they've brought that into the store experience, because that's where the customers want to have that theater. And I think you're right. I think this is going to, in that retail world, especially, it's that customer experience that they want to see it, do it, have it, walk away with it, and that's where we've all got to in our heads, isn't it?
Yeah. And I guess like with that comes a challenge for digitally native brands, how to keep up with what's happening in the physical stores, and how to, guide the customer online, and how to make the experience seem at least similar, if not better, because you're really competing with them. And especially after COVID, everybody is, kind of missing that opportunity of going to the store, trying stuff on. Like even me, I would never order jeans online because the sizes are all messed up, depending on where you go to. So for me, also like the physical store experience is just necessary, and I feel like for a lot of customers that is the case, but not with every product. So
Yeah.
there are products that you should try to emphasize and can try to make the experience the same online.
You're absolutely right. And I said this to a bunch of students a couple of weeks ago. I was talking to them about their sort of career opportunities and what have you. And I said, don't look at your life as a long movie. Look at it as a series of episodes in a Netflix box set, right? Because every episode is different. The shopping experience is different. If you're buying groceries, that's different to I'm going out to see if I can find some, Adidas sneakers with my name on it, that kind of thing. It's a very, very different buying decision that's made. But what's changed, I think, and this is your point about the year, nothing's changed, but everything has changed, is the speed at which consumers are seeing this as normal, necessary. It's not luxury anymore. It's not hyper experience. It's, oh, I didn't know you couldn't do that. That in their minds, and of course in our minds as consumers, the expectation has changed, hasn't it?
It has, it certainly has. And I guess a lot of brands try to fight it with education, talk about what you can do and can't do with embroidery, DTG, DTF, whatever. consumers don't care, honestly. Whenever you go to the store, you're just trying to find something that looks nice.
Yeah.
That, I guess, like, that's where we should meet them instead of going around talking about the technique and all the specifics. No, they should be able to ask questions, and based on our knowledge, we should be able to kind of provide them with the best product and suggestions so they can make informed decisions. They don't have to go in blindly, but we don't have to talk about the specifics. We just need to kind of guide them and, give a solution.
And I think, and solution is the right word. And I think, to take this back to the event in March, upcoming, what we're going to try and do with the personalization experience is also then take people down to the show floor and watch this actually happening in front of them. Because, I think that understanding, and it is a little bit of a legacy. I say this with due respect to anybody listening from the print industry, but there is a little bit of a legacy problem of what you've just described. I want to tell you how I've done it. And over here is a consumer going, I don't care how you've done it. I just care that you've done it. And that's the piece, really. So the comms has to change in many ways to stop talking about what machine you're using and start showing the product that people want to buy.
Exactly.
And if we can get to that, Dan, I think that whole consumer shift of expectation, the print industry can keep up with, and in many ways lead. Because it's getting out of that mindset, isn't it? Of I need to show you how I make stuff. I don't really care how BMW make cars. I only care that the BMW I'm driving works. And if it doesn't work, I don't want to know how to fix it. I'm going to take it back to the BMW guy and let him fix it. So it's all of that. We don't care anywhere near as much about the manufacturing process as the manufacturers would like us to.
Yeah, it's a painful truth, but it is.
I'm just saying it out loud today. So listen, we're a few short weeks away from FESPA coming up March the 19th to the I think it's the 22nd in Amsterdam this year. What are you looking forward to if you haven't been before to the show? I know you're coming and you're speaking with me at the Personalisation Experience on the 20th, but what are you looking forward to seeing at the rest of the show? What do you think you can find?
I honestly want to see all the technological development because I'm like also a technology geek. I do try to show, what we make instead of how we're making it, but I truly want to see what all the crazy suppliers and people have thought about over the last couple of years. So that's one. And second, just talk with like-minded people because I feel like we're in a very, very good industry in a very, very good time for it. So yeah, just trying to grab all the opportunities that it offers. And I think everybody else visiting should try to do the same.
Absolutely. And if you're thinking of visiting and you're watching or listening to this, please do come and see us. Tickets are available. Details are on this post somewhere, I'm sure. But Dan, thank you so much for your time today. It's been fascinating talking to you. I'm really looking forward to talking to you on stage at the Personalisation Experience as well. So that's coming up in a few weeks' time. Hopefully it'll be a little bit warmer than it is today in the springtime in Amsterdam. But if not, we'll both be there. We'll turn the heating up and it'll be fine anyway.
Exactly.
Thanks so much for your time, Dan. I've really enjoyed talking to you.
Thank you. The pleasure is all mine.
Bye-bye.